Maybe if you want to take a moment, introduce yourself, give us a little bit of context for what's going on in your world in Agile.
Yeah, Mike Wright, I'm the CIO at McKinsey. I've been here 9 years, so if there are problems with the technology, it's clearly my fault. I have no one to blame other than myself. Before I'm on my second stint at McKinsey, I was a consultant here in the 90s, then went off and was CIO at a couple of other places in financial services and came back. Initially, I was planning to come back as a consultant, but they said, well, why don't you come back as CIO? We need someone to blame.
Who did you piss off to get that job?
I know, a lot of people.
Sounds like it. Well, at least you're atoning for your sins, even if it's 9 years now doing it. CJ, please.
CJ, former CTO of Clear. Going to be announcing my next gig soon enough. So, unlike Mike, I leave before I get blamed. My pattern is every 3 to 4 years, like to change of pace. So, CTO of different companies appropriately. Looking forward to my next opportunity.
Awesome.
Nick Chodorow, so I'm currently the Chief Innovation Officer for M. Holland, which is a plastics distributor. Been there 3 months.
Have you fixed everything yet?
No, okay. But I've certainly seen a lot that I want to attack. But before that, I was the CIO for Arctic Glacier, which is a private equity-backed packaged ice company.
Can you tell us a little bit more about M. Holland as a company? Because it's actually fascinating, and I think not many people know exactly what it does.
Nor did I, actually, until I joined. But so basically what we do is you have your plastic resin manufacturer, so think Nova Chemicals or Dow. They don't obviously want to sell directly to, say, an injection molder who actually does something with the product, so we sit in the middle. And then what makes us kind of unique, too, is that we don't actually manage or own any of our own warehouses or fleets for logistics, so we outsource a lot of that, too. And right now we're probably the 3rd or 4th largest in the North American market and actively jumping into Europe.
They buy raw plastic and then sell the raw plastic to somebody else. I don't understand that middleman business, but it's extraordinarily lucrative.
Yeah.
So obviously you're only 3 months on the job, and so I think there's a lot of opportunity probably that you're going after. Do you guys have an agile organization today?
So, no.
In the plastics business?
No. The company's 76 years old. It really is still kind of stuck in a waterfall approach to just decision-making, period. And so really kind of my first 3 months, it's a lot of it has been about changing that culture and kind of instilling that, fail fast is much better than us sitting and debating about it for a year. And then also creating an environment where the business operates with the technology team together, and that the concept is every major application that we're going to run the business off of really is a living organism that needs that care and feeding, and that it's okay, and that doing that and having that process tied to it will enable us to pivot. A great example of how we need to pivot really quickly is, a former industry, actually, when I met Anthony, I was the CIO for a large freight railroad. As many of you now know, there's a good chance that most of the American freight railroads will stop operating this week. If that happens, that's a huge, change for us, and we need to pivot as a business and really understand how we're going to move a lot of our goods from the Gulf Coast to, say Detroit for auto manufacturing. And so, we're really trying to build that into our culture.
It's crazy how much stuff still really is moved by train. Like, it's the bulk. It's crazy.
Yeah.
CJ, I'll ask you a slightly different question.
Sure.
What is Agile?
It's really interesting. I've been doing Agile for 20 plus years now.
So you have an exact definition.
I thought I did. in 2016, I was at Amazon, and we did a Agile retraining. And I was kind of like, forget this. I don't need to be trained. I've been doing this for so many years. And I still went through the training, and I realized that I had built biases over my years as an Agile practitioner, that resetting was important. So I think for me, there's Agile principles that absolutely you want to live by and you want to adopt, but how you make it your own for your organization is an art and craft that you figure out. Not every organization is going to take it to the purest form. Agile, whatever you want to call it, Scrum Bond, those different
Sagile.
flavors, except
Sort of agile.
all of those things. It really depends on what state your organization is and how you try to make it a material impact to the way you do
Okay,
things. That's
but
the big thing.
maybe give me one agile principle that you think is the most important.
I think for me, and it's going to sound weird, the continuous improvement aspect of it is what I buy into the most.
Okay.
It's any time I've done a transformation, I become prescriptive, and then I start to let go.
Okay.
And letting go allows the continuous improvement to start to kick in.
It's kind of like starting a fire, but then letting it really,
Yeah,
kind of build its
and
own
the biggest thing for me in any transformation has always been your inputs and outputs.
Sure.
What are you aligning on? What are you looking to go in, and really what are you looking to measure?
Sure.
As long as you align on those, you will be able to give a lot more flexibility to your organization because they will figure out how to continuously improve.
So, Mike, CJ talks about pure agile, which I assume McKinsey is a pure agile organization that does everything perfectly, right?
You could assume that. You'd be wrong.
I know you embarked on a fairly large agile journey, and obviously, I mean, you've got like a couple hundred people overall in the organization,
Yeah,
right?
roughly, yeah.
Okay. Maybe you can talk about how you do this at scale, and for those who don't understand the sarcasm, McKinsey is a very large company. Give us a little bit of a sense of where you are in the agile journey. What are some of the things that kind of have been the gotchas along the way, and how are you scaling it out?
So I don't think we've been doing it quite as long as that, but we've certainly been on our journey, 5, 6 years now. And I think I would absolutely buy into the fact it is about continuous improvement. And it's about also, I think, getting closer to your customer, making sure that actually you're doing things with them rather than to them.
They have constant input.
And that's something where I think, that's a culture change that's harder to get across than perhaps we expected. You think, if you can get your nice stand-ups and your scrums and your transparent backlogs, that this stuff is a sort of a question of ticking off a few of those kind of features. And it's not, it's about actually getting people to take more empowerment. And empowerment is something everyone always says, yeah, I want him to be empowered. Except then actually when you say that means you're therefore accountable for the outcomes, people become a little bit more cautious. And I think that links into the point you're trying to encourage people to fail fast.
Yeah.
And yet, when you say you're accountable, you have to be thinking about how are you providing that, and I don't like this term, but it's quite helpful, psychological safety. Because if people don't feel it's safe to fail, you can guarantee they're going to stuff their backlogs and stuff with contingency. So actually, you're not increasing velocity at all.
That actually makes a lot of sense. And I think that's one of the reasons many agile projects kind of go sideways, is not creating that psychological safety, to borrow the term. But also, I think, you're very far along in the journey compared to maybe others. So if you had advice for Nick, who's embarking on this, beginning of this journey, kind of walking in the door, where do you start? Where did McKinsey start? Where did you kind of, at least stand something up to say, hey, we're working in the right direction?
So I think you've got to start in 2 places, which may sound weird. You've got to start with 1 team or 2 teams and show that it can be done.
Prove the concept.
Small scale, demonstrate it can be done, and demonstrate that the world didn't end. Secondly, you've got to be facilitating at the same time the wider cultural change about how do you actually think about working with business colleagues rather than taking orders from them. And in particular, how do you help the business folks understand that actually there is going to be continuous improvement? Because certainly when we started on our journey, we had sort of conditioned our business customers to think that they had to cram everything into one particular release because they wouldn't see anything else for another 2 years.
Right.
So therefore, that you've really got a bit. And do you guys know abseiling or rappelling? I think you call it over here. And if you do that, when you use a rope to go off a cliff.
Yeah, sure.
And when you do it, every part of your body is screaming, stay as close to the rock as I can. And yet, to do it well, you lean out, you trust the rope, and the physics or whatever it all means means that that's safer. But when you're starting into these journeys, a lot of what you have to do is sort of counterintuitive. And I think that's one of the most difficult things as a leader, I think, is to recognize that you can't control every outcome.
It reminds me of skiing in that certain sense, right? Like if you try to pull back, you're going to fall. But if you
Yeah.
like lean into it, which
That's all, yeah,
maybe
exactly.
that's why they say lean into it.
I want,
just made a
I want to add
discovery.
one thing here. One really, really key important is the cultural change aspect of it.
Sure.
Especially, everyone pins Agile to be a technology transformation, but it's not.
Yeah.
It also means that your legal department, your HR department, if they are not following and becoming just as Agile,
How do
then
you get
technology
legal
cannot-
to be agile, though? I mean, like, real question. Like,
It's actually, one of the frameworks that I've seen with legal becoming Agile is taking actually a very partnership risk-based approach rather than the cookie cutter, like this is the number of weeks it will take to get to an agreement.
okay, I think that's fair. I feel like I've got a good handle on this. Nick, hopefully you do too, right? So where are you going to start? Like, what does this mean to partner with the business? What's actually kind of that, is there a place that you think you can start that process?
So I would say, we've kind of started the same approach. So, I'm spending a lot of time with, kind of the business leaders talking through kind of this change in the culture, and that I call it, we need to change the way we work. Like all of us have to change this. And then, for our kind of small, quick win, which is not really a small, is, when I got hired, we had just started a CRM implementation, and we'll just say it wasn't going very smoothly. And so we've really tried to take that approach just in that one area. And I've gotten buy-in from the business, and then obviously my team, and we're kind of working through that. And, the overarching, so my peers kind of are starting to understand, hey, if this works, then we could do this in other areas, but we all need to devote resources to that. And so we've had plenty of conversations back and forth, almost daily about this, but it's certainly a change for our organization, but it requires that constant communication. You were talking about relationships and, and building those. And obviously for me, this has been a difficult thing in a time of a pandemic, because I'm joining and people are spread out all over, and so we've really been trying to figure out a good way to kind of make that happen both virtually and then in person.
That's a whole other set of problems, is agile during a pandemic. That's a panel for another topic, though. So I think, we had a panel earlier, and it was the cloud panel, and the woman from NBC Universal had mentioned that, you've got kind of the human experience and developer experience, and I think that Dan had pulled it apart, the human experience and the developer experience. So my question to you, are developers humans?
Maybe. Some are, but some, genuinely, and actually, some of the best technologists really do struggle with human interaction.
Well, no, and that's actually obviously tongue-in-cheek. But where I was kind of going with it is, I think that relationship needs to be something that's worked at. Because in reality, it's not just that, like, the developers don't want to talk to the people to get the requirements or the stakeholders. It's also that I think a lot of times the business stakeholders are like, can't I just give you a menu and you go make it for me and I'm done, right?
But that's where actually, again, some of the agile concepts of thinking about your team composition can be helpful. In the sense that if your team is just developers, they are going to struggle to perhaps interact. If you actually make sure you've got proper product manager capabilities, user designers, you actually end up with a much more rounded thought about what problem are you trying to solve that also the business folks find easier to relate to. And so you can start to see a sort of a nice synergistic type of thing rather than a bit of a car crash.
It closes that loop on continuous,
Yeah.
right? I have a couple more questions, but I also want to turn over to the audience for Q&A. So if you do have a question, feel free, raise your hand, flag it. Someone will come around with a mic. But as we're waiting on those, so I think that Agile has almost got a cultish kind of feel to it. It's almost like when, Agile comes out in some conversations, people are like, how do you combat this like very militant, Agile is a cult kind of perception? What are the things that, have you come across it? Am I just making things up? CJ, have you seen this?
Oh, absolutely. There are fanatics about the Agile concept and the tenets, core tenets. I want to follow this. And I think for me, it always comes back to what is your version of Agile? And that's one thing about Agile is that its tenets are meant to be flexible. It's meant to be interpreted for your organization. And anyone that kind of just reads it and says, here's my commandments and I will live by every single one of them, is going to fail at their transformation and
So
journey.
you're more like a New Testament agile versus like the,
I've gone through my own journey.
Mike, please.
No, look, I think that's right. You do get people who get fixated on, we've got to have a stand-up before 9 a.m., if not, we're not doing Agile. Seriously. And I think trying to help people focus on outcomes rather than just the mechanics. In other words, it's not how you're doing it, it's what's the outcome that you're looking to get. And more flexibility, faster velocity of decision making, those are the things you want to be focusing on rather than the mechanics. But some people do get passionate about the mechanics.
Fair. Nick?
Yeah, I mean, so in a past life, I had a similar role with an options trading firm, and there were certainly people in there who it was like, if we didn't have it at 8 a.m., the day was over. I think through the
Give up, go home, it's over,
through the
done.
last 15 years, I've kind of experienced and learned that it's all about what fits your place of work, and that again goes back to why, to me, it's about us figuring out at M. Holland, how do we want to work collectively, and then matching that. And you'd mentioned earlier, like product management. I think that that's a concept that we've never had from a how do we internally do work. Obviously, we have product managers who deal with different types of plastics, but taking that approach into our world has been where we started with the CRM, and so far it's really helped kind of matching a product manager who's a technical person, and then the product manager from the business who can really represent and then make those decisions. The two of them can make those decisions together, which before we would struggle, because then you'd end up with 30 salespeople trying to tell us what to do. So.
30 different decisions.
Yeah.
Any questions from the audience? Anybody? Please, Dan.
There you go. Thanks. Thanks, Anthony. So having implemented Agile in 3 different companies, still probably haven't got it right yet. But this is one thing I've always struggled with, is like managing the stakeholder at the end, like with the roadmap. What are we doing for the next year, and setting the budget and on all that. And of course, the team wants to be totally agile. Well, we're going to do incremental, and we'll do our 2-week sprints and all that. And I've had pretty good success doing that. But I'd be curious if you have any insights on when the senior people are saying, what do I get? When am I going to get it? What does it cost? And you come back and go, well, it's Agile, you got to wait. I mean, what kind of advice can you offer our audience for that?
Go ahead.
I'll jump in on one unique experience that I had where there was yearly planning, and what was sold to customers and clients was a 12-year, like 12-month, this is what's coming. And I wanted to do an Agile transformation, and what I did is I leveraged primarily initially data. I say, listen, the way we operate right now, my organization was about 50 to 60% predictable. I said, and therefore you're having to disappoint your customers and clients quite a bit. If I get my predictability up to 70%, 70+%, well, does that change the perception? They're like, absolutely. If 70 to 80% of the time you are on time with regards to when you're going to deliver something, I'm on board. I was like, great. To get there, let's start talking quarters. So
That's
you
a
start
really good
breaking it.
example. Yeah, I like that a lot, actually. And
That's really good.
I wonder if some of those organizations don't have the maturity to know even how much they're missing.
It's our job to bring that maturity, right?
Yeah.
And that's what we have to do. Any kind of key metrics you want to, not give you this back, but any key metrics you're looking at, whether it's velocity or some quality metrics?
Predictability. Number one metric for me is predictability. And you start with an organization predictable against overall. Eventually, as you mature, you want predicted against committed. And the predicted against committed moves you more towards the model of you actually knew what you were going to try to plan to, and there's no changes coming in. Initial predictability is purely getting is the organization mature enough that they can do what they say?
I think that's also a really good distinction.
So predictability, definitely, and also satisfaction. So, and both ways, so are your team members happy? Because actually, particularly in periods of retention, if people are actually enjoying their work, you're going to have a better retention, which is helpful. But also, obviously, the customer satisfaction. do people actually think they're getting more impact from the work you're doing for them?
I was going to say it's satisfaction. Everywhere I've been, it's the satisfaction of who my end customer is, whether that be internal or external, or my own employees or my own team. On are they happy in their job, or do they feel like they've been pushed over the edge? Right? Have they gone from 60-hour week to 80-hour week because we've done this in order to make the end customers?
Or they feel like they're cutting the quality of their work, and
Yeah.
as a result, delivering something that they
Yeah,
don't
they're
have.
mediocre at
It's
a
not
lot
just the
of things.
customer satisfaction and not just the happiness at work, but like the satisfaction of the product, of what they've delivered, because I think that really influences a lot. Any other quick questions? Please.
Okay, for McKinsey, what's the metaverse look like for McKinsey?
Holy heck, that's a long question. How long we got?
And that's all the time we have.
We've got lots of articles on it on the web. So, but if you can answer that, I think you've got a great career.
It's called McKinseyverse. No, you guys can definitely connect, and thanks, Jacob. I think Metaverse is a little outside of scale of Agile. However, maybe it's what's beyond Agile, which I think was the name of the topic. I would like to thank you guys very much for sharing your sagely wisdom. And thank you, everyone else.
Thank you.